The definition of endgame in Merriam-Webster: the stage of a chess game after major reduction of forces. Also, the final stage of some action or process. If we go by how endgame is defined in most games nowadays, be it single player or MMOs, it usually means things you do after you have completed or reached the end of the game. End of the game meaning you have finished the main storyline, usually how it goes for story-based games and RPGs, or have reached max levels when it comes to online games, MMOs, or live service games. Genshin Impact is a single-player, live service online ARPG, where the story and content are released over time. And like how most live service games, long-term engagement is the primary focus of its design. Every patch introduces new stuff, more so if it's a major patch. New regions, stories, quests, enemies and bosses, as well as items, and most notably, the moneymakers, new characters. All of these are done to keep the players interested and engaged in the game. And this is the part where Genshin Impact confuses me. So-called endgame and its content in general. A few weeks back, GameSpot allegedly had an interview with Hoyoverse developers. Not to sound disparaging about this alleged interview, but I would probably find it more reliable if it was done in an actual Genshin Impact stream, because they always seem to do that before a patch, just like what they did with patch 3.2. Simply put, it made waves within the community, especially the term excessive anxiety. As a big ball of bumbling anxious mess myself, this got me interested and pretty curious about most Genshin Impact news. So after a few days reading stuff in Reddit, Twitter, HoYoLabs, and watching YouTube videos, just like any other gaming fanbase/community, there's always mixed opinions and reception regarding certain topics. However, there always seemed to be a prevalent concern within the community, namely in regards to the endgame and some of its other systems. And with how the player base reacted with topics of endgame and resin system were mentioned in the alleged interviews, well, pretty much confirms that these issues are way up there in terms of importance. So let's start off with the resin system. Energy system is not a new concept to online games, especially for mobile or gacha-based games. The problem with it is, well, it exists. And it exists purely to artificially prolong engagement with the game. It's not for some good-hearted reason so you would take breaks, because if it is, then purchasing additional resins using real-life currency shouldn't even be an option at all. But that option exists, so it's either you spend money to replenish it, or come back the next day so you continue farming materials and artifacts. Both a win-win scenario for the game. Personally, the best way I can think of to improve this kind of system is, well, just remove it altogether. But obviously that won't happen. So the next best thing is to change how restrictive it is. One way is to increase your condensed resin and original resin cap, so you have more freedom and leeway when you want to spend your resin or whenever you have the time to do so. Another is to reduce the needed resin to get the rewards and maybe faster regen of the resins, so you actually have more tries per day to actually use it. Now, as for the so-called endgame, currently there's only the Spiral Abyss, which for a 2-year-old game is quite lacking. Which is probably why the fanbase reacted quite explosively, I would say, because for some odd reason, they took the not making another type of permanent endgame content that is similar to the Spiral Abyss to mean that there is no other endgame to be added entirely. It might just be me, but wouldn't it be better if a different type of endgame is added rather than having 2 Spiral Abysses? And there's always the possibility that more floors will be added to the Abyss anyway, which also means it's probably gonna have a revamp or a rebalancing of some kind to its difficulty and its quite lackluster rewards. I'm just speculating and hoping, okay? But seriously, for the supposed hardened content in the game, the rewards is really lacking. So we go back to the point where the community is actually reacting to the lack of other available permanent endgame content. Because realistically speaking, by the merit of its own design, from the daily commissions, limited resin regeneration, and actually missing a welkin you purchased if you don't log in for a day, Genshin Impact is fully leaning into the fact that they do want you to play the game every single day, for the game to be a part of your daily routine. But what comes next? Or where will you be even using all of these items or resources that you're getting? For the people who have been playing for a long time, maybe even since the launch. I wouldn't be surprised if they already completed majority, if not all of the things you could do in-game. And even if a new region gets released adding more stuff to do, that technically becomes the late game. Because surprise, that's how live service game works. The newest patch always becomes the late game, which means there is a necessity for a separate type of content that could be called as the endgame. Preferably something different from Spiral Abyss. Now, don't get me wrong. I know there is actually plenty of stuff to do and content that you can do in Genshin Impact. And there is plenty of ongoing events at any given time, which gives players more things to do, and actually gives decent rewards for a limited time. That only furthers the point of you should play the game if you don't want to miss out on something, exacerbating that fear of missing out within the players. That isn't surprising anymore since Genshin Impact is a live service game, and that's how live service game usually operates. Then, what is exactly the problem? Are people just being too critical? Are they just whining for the sake of it? Or is it because the resin system is too rigid and no improvements has been made for a long time, despite the fact that more and more domains and bosses are getting released that needs resin to claim the rewards? Or is it because there is a severe lack of endgame content other than the Spiral Abyss, which, by the way, needs you to have a really good team to actually finish, while only rewarding you with minimum rewards? So, what do you think, guys? Leave your comments down below, and what other things do you think needs improvements or fine-tuning in Genshin Impact? That's it for now. Stay safe everyone, and don't let that tiny flying gremlin eat your food.